a seat to the bar and join us for another episode of McAnally's Pubcast, a podcast exploring the fun and fantastical mind of Jim Butcher's The Dresden Files series. Hosts Tansenn, Jess, and Maggie bring you another round of literary analysis on this immense, immersive, and colorful environment inhabited by Harry Dresden, the world's only licensed private investigator and professional wizard. Join an active and engaged community of new and die-hard dedicated fans focused on the fabulous themes, theories, characters, context, lore, and more. This is McAnally's Dresden Files Pubcast, brought to you by Free Flow Rambling. Conjure by it at your own risk. Welcome to the McAnally's Pubcast, brought to you by Free Flow Rambling. This is episode 9.3, Deal with the Devil, where we are covering the novel Summer Night. My name is Tansenn, and I am joined by Maggie.
Hello.
And Jess.
November.
Chapter 3. Mab makes Dresden an offer he can't refuse. 3 tasks to be performed for her in return for his freedom from his obligations. Dresden accepts the new deal and receives his first request: to solve the murder of a local artist and return a stolen item. So Dresden is gobsmacked that he's talking to a Faerie Queen, and then becomes very, very afraid.
I think that's a very appropriate response. Especially considering which Faerie Queen.
They're roughly I'd say from chapter 3 to chapter 7 or 8. I'm just grinning the whole time. All the books are fun when he gets hit with par for the course. Every book starts out with Harry being slapped in the face with 8 different plots. Mm-hmm. But this one is especially each and every single one as it builds up and builds up and builds up. I'm just it's just it just starts right here and I'm just you're fucked. And it's so good. It's so good. It just builds here and I'm just so ecstatic for so long. I just love Summer Night.
Everyone's got a little bit of that Schadenfreude. You take it to you're just give me all the
you're so fucked.
I think they just call that sadism at this point.
Yeah, maybe it's past beyond. Yeah, fair.
Either way, I like it a lot.
Yeah. And we get a whole nice description of his icy cold fear and turning his insides to and just not gonna yeah. He's alrighty then.
And Mab commends him on his fear, yeah, you should be.
Yeah.
And she asks him how it feels, and Dresden compares her to Godzilla, which unfortunately Mab just doesn't really acknowledge at all, whether she gets it or not. She's huh, okay.
Maybe she didn't like it. Maybe she did. I don't know. But yeah.
Dresden knows he has no advantage or defense for Mab either. This is he's back to ground zero again.
Oh, crap. Yeah, and he's he still doesn't meet her eyes, and he's not because I was worried about a soul gaze anymore, because, well, you both have to have a soul for that. But he's I just don't want to look, a big, huge, powerful entity in the eye, because that could be all kinds of bad for me anyways, just on its own.
Which makes me wonder why she was prompting as when she was masquerading as human for the soul gaze.
Thing was right, and that's the thing. I was if he'd been all right, bitch, would she just have been oh, this guy's too stupid and too
naive,
impulsive, right? Is he too impulsive that he's just gonna swap a soul gaze with anybody at a drop of a hat?
Everything she does is a test, right?
Or would it have been a case of well, he just would have figured it out that much sooner, because as soon as he tried to do a soul gaze, it wouldn't have worked that way? Or would she have slapped him with some whammy, because he's yeah, I know, it's same thing. I was kind of that too, and I was why would you try when it's not gonna work and it's just gonna give away your thing? But
right,
who, you say, who
just
knows
to fuck with him?
But,
look, nothing happened. Guess what?
Yeah. That's, I think, sort of at this point, best I can figure would just be again, part of this whole, trying to distract and whatever, because she's oh, you can still think on your feet. So maybe it was just that whole he didn't just automatically be yeah, okay, sure. What the fuck do I want with someone that's gonna be brain dead in a year because they soul gaze everyone they meet? But anyways,
good point.
Yeah. So
look at this piece of Swiss cheese. Yeah, great.
Yeah, right, exactly. Guy gibbering in a corner, drooling on himself. Yeah.
I'm sure she does. She's used to that reaction with men.
Yeah, I'm sure she is. However, not useful to her.
Yeah, so she apparently was watching that whole Mab shit. Sorry, she was watching that whole Leah shit. She was like, so I saw that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. You big fat weasel.
Yeah. And, like, Harry doesn't give a shit at all. He's like, I don't care, I'm not in this, I don't know what fairies, like, leave me alone, I don't want to deal with it, I'm a afraid little boy, and I want to go find a corner to sit and cry in. Like, good thing he cried earlier, I guess.
I get, right?
Yeah.
Helps some of it. It's okay, at least she does give him some kudos for that whole thing, too. Because she's like, not very many people can one-up your godmother. So the fact that you managed to get away with anything and then, like, reshape the bargain with her, she's like, you get a couple, you get some points for that. Because
she quite enjoys
but that
him.
was that. And now you're dealing with me.
She's impressed. She enjoys him. She loves his anger, his strength, his even she enjoys his fear. Like, she is just like, I love this. This guy is just what I need right now.
Right?
Harry's a little bit of winter in and of himself. He's got a little bit of that, Not necessarily malicious, but,
Irreverent and
yeah, like,
that.
You may serve wizard or you may be served. Yeah, that's kind of his problem, too, yeah.
Pretty much. This is a kind of an interesting thing, too, right? Because she's like, do you not wish to be free? And he's like, well, what do you mean? Whatever. But, maybe it's a little bit later on. But anyways, he says, I didn't think you were much, for the concept.
Right.
And she's like, oh, on the contrary, I adore it. Anyone that doesn't have it wants it at whatever price kind of thing, right? So
that's a lovely exchange.
Yeah, just again, another nice twist on how she, it's like, well, I'll give you your freedom, maybe, perhaps. And, but exactly, it's like, sure, because I can always get something out of it. So what do I get until you manage to buy your way free, is the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Dresden tries to calm himself and think rationally about the deal. I like that he does take the time to sort of go, okay. What's good? What's right? What do I need to do?
Yeah, right. He's like, Mab just offered me a sweet deal, like candy, like Halloween candy. He's like, so I better check for cyanide and razor blades.
Right. And he reminds himself that Fae have a way of making sure further bargains only get you deeper instead of into the clear, as he puts, just like credit card companies or those student loan people. Now there's evil for you.
Right?
Damn right.
Right? I was gonna say.
I'm thinking about a Jim Butcher right now, freshly out of college.
Oh my god, I read some, that reminds me of a meme too, like there's one of my friends posted that she like 20 years ago got a $20,000 loan for student loan, has paid it off several times and still owes $200,000 now.
Because of interest, yep.
Yeah.
Complete bullshit.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Yep.
How hard is that, right?
Yeah, which just verifies for you, there is evil for you. Correct, still appropriate today.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, folks, stay in school. Go get a degree. Woo-hoo.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, totally.
Might as well just be a wizard. Put your eye in the yellow book.
The yellow book
pages.
So he starts trying to plug whatever holes he can come up with and foresee that might be there.
That's a fine job. It's not terrible. Trying to cover his tracks there with that,
Oh, he does a fine job, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
you can't trade it off to anyone else, because obviously that's fucking
right,
sucks.
right, yeah.
Make sure you cover that one from now on.
Keep trading it up worse and worse and worse, right? I mean, exactly, if he was worried about what Leah could do.
Well, yeah, I mean, she
Mab
could,
is a
she could trade it to
magnitude
Don
above that,
Ortega,
Well, okay, fine, but...
Well,
Yeah.
Mab sets those terms, which are really quite very simple terms. She requires 3 tasks from Dresden, and when they're fulfilled, the obligations to her completely just cease. Like, that's it. That's all you have to do.
Yep.
What? That's it?
Which Dresden immediately questions.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, no.
Yeah.
What? Nah.
So he's like, so I get to pick what they are. Like, you can't make me do anything. And she's like, yeah, no.
Yeah, no punishment for refusing
by
something.
refuse, there's no... Yeah, and not by proxy either, right? You can't send the minions out to torture him or whatever. Or, if he says no, she can't do anything about it.
I like that he adds that Mab can't sell it off anymore. So, like, none of this tradesies again.
Yeah. And then he's like, so I just can pass you the salt 3 times and it's over, right? And she's like, yeah, not that easy though. Maybe, but no.
There is this one great description that I loved of Butcher's, and it's how he describes Mab's laugh. She laughed, It sounded as merry, clear, and as lovely as bells if somebody pressed them against my teeth while they were still ringing.
Yeah. That's a very vivid, isn't it, too?
It's a little, like, visceral for me. Like,
yeah.
I don't know if it's because I'm a musician, like, for background, but I
get
think
it,
of, like, that, like, makes my skin crawl and my hair stand on end, like, thinking of, like, a tuning fork or something like that.
Against you. Yeah, no.
Yike.
Yeah, it's like nails and chalkboard. It's just very, very not good.
Right.
This is irrelevant to the podcast, but like that's like when I see gore, people start describing it. It's like my brain just starts screaming. It's like, I really gotta make the sound myself, or else it's just in my head and I'm gonna die. Just like get it away,
right? Yes, another very good description there.
Really like
Not
it.
of good things, but it definitely, it makes you feel it.
Mm-hmm.
So he tries to cover all his business, and Mab is kind of impressed by this too, right? She's like the whole, fool me twice, shame on me. So she's like, all right, again, you're still like in a shitty, like you can tell.
Mortals are idiots, but you're not the biggest idiot of
mortals are idiots. You're impressed and you're scared by the queen standing in front of you, but you're still trying to rationalize and cover as many bases as you can. And I mean, I'm a Faerie Queen, so you're never going to get them all. But you're trying.
Yeah, you're trying.
You got.
I appreciate the effort.
That's exactly right. Because again, she does want something. She doesn't need something useful out of him. She doesn't need the Swiss cheese or the guy gibbering in a corner, right? So he's like, well, against my better judgment, and goes ahead and makes a deal with her anyway. So he still kind of knows, like, I shouldn't, and I'm sure I haven't caught everything, but I'm kind of in a bind. And I kind of like the way, he sort of justifies it by, better to take action and maybe have some regrets or consequences than to not do anything and, get steamrolled or whatever, right? So.
Well, and he almost instantly regrets it. But if you think about it, like, what option did he really have? Like, he didn't have one. Mab owns his debt, so he just...
Well,
yeah.
This is your one way out, or she gets to tell you and control you for the rest of your life.
She's being nice, technically, by being like, you can do 3 tasks for me of your own choosing, when really she could just be like, you're doing this, go, bitch.
Yeah.
Right?
Which she kind of does anyway.
Obviously, it's more he's tricked into doing whatever the fuck she wants anyways, but she's doing a bit more of a rigmarole than she necessarily has to, you know?
For some reason, she's like begetting on his free will. Like, she really wants that choice from him.
And she says in the last chapter, too, like, I'm just hedging my bets, and that's very Mab. Like, no matter what, the Fae are going to come up winning. They've got 100 eventualities for 100 different situations, and for whatever reason, she didn't just, like, she wasn't bored walking down the street and just picked one random mortal to harass. She sees Harry as, like, as much as even Bianca did, like, you've got this guy and you see a lot of potential and you're like, I can mold him to be most useful for me, right? So
he's got some good glimmer of potential and, like, that power, like raw power, I think.
Yeah, that's what the council hates about him.
Right? Yeah, exactly. For all the good does him, it's like, it's great, but...
Yeah.
But yes, no, she's definitely is contingencies upon contingencies upon contingencies, right? So yeah, either way... fine, if she doesn't get this time what she wants out of him, there's always something else somewhere else, right? But I think that is part of it, too. Like, I mean, obviously, because she bought his debt, she's just shown she does have a certain amount of actual control over him with the whole letter opener and stuff like that. But isn't that a lot of the whole thing with the fairies and the trickery and they kind of need the free will? They kind of need you to accept and go into the bargain, right? Like,
I don't think they need it, but I think they really get off on it.
Well, maybe that's just the...
Like, choose me. Choose me.
Yeah.
I don't need you to choose me, but I want you to choose me.
Maybe that's all it is.
Because I know Leah, like the foundation that she's based off of is as a creature of seduction. Like, why wouldn't Mab be any different in that?
Yeah, no,
in that
I
regard?
guess.
Like,
yeah, no, for sure that way. I was just thinking overall with the fairies, and I thought this was more sort of part of the human pact, is what again, allows them to have more of that control and whatever, as if you've sort of freely given it over to them, as if they, doesn't it provide more loopholes if they, but maybe not. Maybe
really, like, fucked up, but, like, that just, like, it kind of, like, made me think in my head, like, the difference between, like, Joffrey and Littlefinger, where it's, like, Joffrey was just, like, I'm
no idea what you're talking about.
It's Game of Thrones, so you don't know,
but,
where, like, Joffrey was just, like, I'm gonna torture every single person in this place because I'm the king and I can do whatever you want, whereas Joffrey was like, oh no, you're gonna come begging and crawling to me and then I'm gonna ruin your life. It was like a lot more like Joffrey was just like out in the world bashing heads because he could, but Littlefinger was like in the background the whole time.
Just that
like,
covert power.
I'll destroy your life and you'll be asking me to do it the whole time, like just like evil, just like a different kind of icky, but still horrible.
So Mab does present Dresden with an envelope containing her first request. Within are the details of a man's death.
Where did she get that envelope? She doesn't have a purse.
Right? Exactly. She just magicked it up. She doesn't care now. Yeah.
Within are the details of a man's death. I wish you to vindicate me of it by discovering the identity of his killer and return what was stolen from him. And we learn that the dead man is Ronald Rule, a local artist. And the police have already deemed the death as an accident, which Mab vehemently is like, no, that's not it.
No, it's not. Definitely a murder, one of which I am being accused of, and I don't want to be accused of it because that causes bigger shit on the whole. Fix it right now.
Yeah, I know. He's like, what do you care? The cops aren't after you. And she's like, there's other authorities than just mortal law, you dick.
Which is totally hilarious because, she's like, yeah, you're right. I don't give a shit about the cops. Good job. Good detective skills
in the world. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and she sort of tells him it's none of his business in a way, too. Like, no, this is just justice, and that's all you need to know. That's it.
So I want you to do it. I've asked you to do it, so you're going to do it. That's
also, real quick, almost everybody knows this, but for those who do not know, Ronald Rule, J.R.R. Tolkien,
was his middle names.
I didn't know that.
I was going to say, we've all talked about it before, so I know. Oh,
cool.
So that's where Ronald
I'm sure
Rule
we have, and
from.
I'm pretty sure she said that the last time too, folks.
I'm sure,
I swear. I didn't know that. That's so cool.
A really fun thing for me in my life is both Mom and Tansenn just tell me a story I've already heard, and I just pretend to be surprised because I can't tell them I've heard this story every day I meet them. So I just often listen to the same story from them over and over and over again.
Okay, you
not
tell
every time
me
I
plenty.
see you, but I get the same story from both of you all the time. I'm like, who cares?
I really
we
enjoy
all
having
do
a
that.
goldfish memory, personally.
Yeah.
Everything
Keeps
is new
things
and
fresh.
sparkly, right?
Everything is new and sparkly.
I was going to say, there's plenty of times when you do tell me, or I start to tell a story, and you're like, I'm like, no, this happened yesterday. I haven't told you, but thanks. But everybody does it, because I know I have people in my life that do that to me constantly, too. And it's just a case of sometimes of like, you don't remember who you've told or what you've told or what it, I was going to backtrack, actually, Smiling Cheeks. I sort of had made a note of this when then we were talking about the other thing. But when they finally do make the agreement, so he's like, all right, we have a bargain, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, felt the little, frisson of tension or whatever. And then Mab closed her eyes, smiling a feline smile with those dark lips, and inclined her head. Good, yes. And it's just, with hindsight, you can see just all the extra benefits and all the extra pleasure Mab has in him agreeing to this. And when you know down the road there's further ideas she had for him or what she wanted or where this plan is, you know what I mean? And you can just like, oh yeah, right? In the moment you just think she's like, okay, cool, I got him, he's got it. And then when you, pull back to much bigger picture, you're like, oh, she is so doing like the happy dance and the Snoopy dance and the, on the inside.
I sit here for these first couple chapters of Summer Night and I just grin and grin and grin.
Well, I'm sure with Mab, the first time somebody says yes to her, it's all that much easier for her to get them to do her bidding every time after.
As proven.
All right.
And I mean, even if you want to say it's like a very common phrase, right? So it could just have been a coincidence, but even still, Harry, a little frisson prickled over the nape of my neck down the length of my spine.
It could be.
Is it just a phrase, or is that just like one more?
Yeah.
Who knows? Drop in a barrel.
Right.
The other thing, and this is going back to dear old Marsha's reading, and I'm sure most people, I don't know, maybe it's popular enough, but just in case for the odd people that aren't in North America and aren't as familiar with Looney Tunes, the Wile E. Coyote. So that's the whole joke, is it's Wile E. Coyote. It's how it's spelled, W-I-L-E, middle initial E, Coyote. The joke being, of course, that it's Wile E. Coyote, because being wily is sneaky and cunning and whatever, right? So he's not just a Wile E. Coyote, he's wily. But when he reads it, he always says he's like Wile E. Coyote. And I'm like, it's not Wile E. Coyote, it's Wile E. Coyote. And it says, I can't help it every time I read it. So it's one of those swell things.
Do you think vampires have time to watch cartoons?
You're wrecking the joke, Marcia.
Spike has things to do.
Do you know the naming of Wile E. Coyote actually has changed the name of it's not pronounced coyote, it's coyote. They changed it, and people have been calling coyotes ever since.
Is that where that? Because I do know there is that duality of coyotes and coyotes. So they do it just to make it rhyme or something, like
That's
Wile
it,
Coyote, and then, oh, well, there, isn't that funny? I always thought that was just sort of more of a regional dialect thing.
So 2 things about that. You know the insult that Bugs always calls Elmer Fudd? He always calls him a Nimrod.
Okay.
So Nimrod is now synonymous with an idiot or a dunce or whatever like that, right? But the actual legendary character Nimrod was an incredibly smart man, and Bugs was using it sarcastically, but nobody knew who the real Nimrod was. So now his name is synonymous with, like,
Stupidity.
And then second of all, Bugs Bunny is the reason why everyone associates carrots with rabbits. Bugs Bunny was doing that. He started eating carrots to imitate
A cigar or whatever?
no. Okay, Bugs' nonchalant carrot-eating manner was inspired by a scene and it happened one night when fast-talking Clark Gable snacks on the carrots while leaning on a fence.
Oh, I have
So
come across
because he
that
always
before.
eats the carrots, and now people think that rabbits just like carrots, but it was just because Bugs Bunny was imitating Clark Gable. And now people think that that's just a rabbit thing, but it was just a Bugs Bunny thing,
That's funny.
right?
See, this is why you
The
watch
Looney
the show.
Tunes, like, change our entire history.
Right?
Yeah.
That's how shit, like, North
People
American
think
memory is.
Roadrunners are like,
like that,
7-foot tall birds.
It's like that old joke or whatever like that, where it's like Europeans think 100 miles is a long way to go, and Americans think 100 years is a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Or North Americans, as the case may be for us, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like the Looney Tunes shapes our entire history because that's like the majority of the history we have here. It's like we don't have anything more. Nothing's been on TV as long as the Looney Tunes, so we just use that.
Where people don't realize that like a bunch of the music that's in it is actually from operas.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
just
so
like
it's really,
anything. Like the most iconic sounds ever is like, yeah, that's like every Samsung ringtone ever. It's like, yeah, it actually was bought first. But
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. It's the Samsung alarm now, but
Exactly. When you're like, oh, this is the Bugs Bunny theme. It's like, well, yeah,
great.
no. It's, but,
that's all, folks. Except for we're not done this episode, so.
Okay, where were we?
Ronald Rule. And this is kind of funny too, right? Because Mab Nodded, hailed as a visionary of the American artistic culture. Though I assume they use the term lightly. I'm surprised because again, I'm like, okay, here, so they're calling him like an artist as in like picture drawing artist. But of course, Ronald Rule Jr. was hailed as a visionary for his fantastic world building and the whole epic that is, you know, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and all. So again, it was just kind of like, Mab's like, oh, I assume they use it loosely. You know?
To be fair to Mab, though, her definition of culturally.
Yeah, well, exactly. He just like
She's got a little more
imagined a whole
diversity.
thing. I like created an entire world and destroyed it again and over. It's fine.
I say, how impressed are you when you watched the building and fall of Rome?
Yeah, exactly right. And probably influenced it heavily.
Yeah, and caused both. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, creators of worlds of imagination, it says. Well, I guess now that he's dead, they'll say all kinds of nice things. But yes, a very cute little
That's so cool.
interaction. No, yeah, it's
Yep.
fun.
I
It's
like that.
fun. Thanks, picture. Yeah.
I totally did not see it.
Yeah, because that was his first, I believe, was The Hobbit. That was when he fell in love with, because he was like homesick with the measles or mumps when he was like 7, and his sister brought him a copy of The Hobbit to read, and that was it. He fell in love with like horse and sword fantasy fiction, which is what he really wanted to write, which is where Codex Alera and stuff came from. But this was kind of what people were in the mood for, and this is what flew first. And
Nice little nod.
yeah.
Dresden does ask for what was stolen from him, but Mab only tells him that he'll know it when he sees it.
Yeah. Thanks a
Thanks.
lot.
Yeah.
Fucking
Very
stupid and
bad.
non-compliant.
Thank you for not answering yet another question.
Yeah. That's gotta be like St. Anthony.
If I take
Like,
it.
people are just
If I go.
nonstop praying to find their shit. He's like, what? What are you missing now? All day long, you people are looking for shit. No one knows what the fuck they're looking for.
So, I'll think about it. And she's like, oh, you will accept. And he's like, I said, I'll think about it. She's like, yeah, whatever. You just like show me to the door now.
Oh my, Mr. Dresden, does your hand still hurt you?
Oh, shucks. What do you think?
This is such a covert display of power just for fun on her part. Like, just so you know, I can do this.
Covert or overt?
Or, sorry, overt, sorry.
Okay, yeah. Like such an overt.
I didn't mean to say covert,
Yeah,
sorry.
like...
Just, but I mean, it is. It's just like this, just so you know I can do this. I'm going to do it. There you go.
Know.
And I love that she says exactly,
Oh, I know. He's like, damn it, we had a deal.
I agree not to punish you for refusing me. I agree not to punish you or harass you by proxy. I did that just for spite.
Yeah, I know, Qualls.
What a mean streak.
I know, right?
Gotta love her for it, though. What a way around the deal, right?
Like, I wasn't harassing you. I just felt like causing you pain, so that was just a straight up, it's like,
Speak of
we didn't
sadism.
cover that. Yeah.
Wasn't part of the deal.
It has nothing to do with that. That's not why. It's
And you can't kill me just because it's fun for you. Oh, shoot.
Oh, yeah. That, yes, another brilliant. I mean, he really does do well at... Because not that Mab is likable, as not the same way that Thomas is. Like, he does get across, this power and this aura and this...
She's very charismatic.
Yeah, charismatic is a good way, right? Like, very regal and stately and poised and
yet a bit of a wild card because of...
And then, yeah, right? It's just like, but she's like, still like, I can just, it's like it makes you sort of, like you say, in awe and, intimidated or respectful of, but yeah, don't forget that she is what she is, Well, I guess very much like what she comes to right here.
Right, where she tells him the story of the fox and the scorpion.
Yes.
And she tells Dresden that he will take the case because it's in his nature, and then she leaves him.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because he has to be like, I don't like most of us, at least, North American, whatever, most of us know these fables and things, Aesop's fables and the holes. But it's so funny. Harry has to be kind of the stupid one here because there's nobody else to be the dumb one and ask the questions of, right? So Harry has to be like, I don't know, I've never heard of it. And just so Mab can, lay it out there for anyone that's not familiar or whatever, right? And he's still snotty about it. He's like, that's your story. He's like, don't quit your day job. But yes, I love it. And then Mab is just Mab can just be like, I can just zap you when I want just because.
Well, it almost like makes me laugh because like a Harry Potter musical.
Yes.
Which, by the way, if you don't know it, you should absolutely watch it.
So
you
much
should
fun.
just believe that it's also part of the canon the same way the books and the
Darren
movies are.
Criss
You should
before.
also just throw on the Harry Potter musical as the third piece of canon. It's amazing. It's hilarious. There's 3 of them.
So much
Love
fun.
it. So good. However, in one of them, it's like they obviously have to change the script a little bit to make it all work into just 3 musicals. Point is, there's a moment when Draco Malfoy and Voldemort do an unbreakable vow with each other, right? Mm-hmm. And they're like, they're like laying out the terms with each other, right? And then right at the very end, as they're about to break, they're like handshaking, agreeing, and then right at the end, Draco's like, and you have to be my slave for a whole day. Ah! He's like, you got me! But it's like it almost feels like that whole Mab and Harry thing. It's like, yeah, and you can't send anyone to harass me, and you can't trade my deals, and I can choose whatever I want. And I was like, and I can hurt you just if it's fun for me. Ah!
Yeah, right, exactly.
Just slip that in real quick,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So funny though. Voldemort's, you little shit! That's the second time that has happened to me.
Fucking fuckers.
So Dresden
good.
watches her go down the hall, and, to quote it, maybe I've been shut away in my lab too long, but Spencer never mentions that the Faerie Queen has a great ass. So
Yeah.
I noticed these things, so sue me. Now, I did a little bit of research on this, and the name Spencer, this is reference to Edmund Spenser, who wrote an English epic poem called The Faerie Queen in 1590.
Yeah.
Of note, though, this epic has some familiar characters that you would appreciate. Jess is Arthur of the Round Table and Merlin.
I referenced this in our Merlin episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. Spencer is quite the name in Arthurian legend.
Such a quick little detail that
Right?
holds so much to it.
Which is why I think even more so, Butchers just threw it in there. He's like, because you know who is Mab from Arthurian legend? We'll get there. Morgana? I think so. Or Lady of the Lake. Butcher's got the very convenient excuse of using many
Multiples.
threshold or mantles.
Right, so she could have been more than one person then.
Whereas other stories, they almost do the exact same thing, but they don't have the language for it, It's like, like Spencer called it the Lady of the Lake, and Gregory of Monmouth called it Morgana, and Disney called it Morgan, and, they all use different names and different terms, but they all mean the same person. But then you read another story, and they totally think it's 2 different people, so it's like, but luckily Butcher's got the whole benefit of being like, I can do whatever I want. Multiple mantles, bitch.
All the same. They're all
make it all
different,
work.
all or nothing. Yeah.
So anyways.
Exactly. Spencer apparently never mentioned that she had a great ass.
Oversight, I'm sure.
Thank you to our Patreon subscribers for your generous support. It's people like you who help us to do what we do. If you're not yet a Patreon subscriber, sign up today and get a fuck ton of bonus content, kick-ass merch, behind-the-scenes outtakes, and more. Sign up today at www.patreon.com/freeflowrambling.
Chapter 4. Harry makes his way to the location of the council meeting where he meets up with his old mentor Ebenezer in the parking lot. Ebenezer reveals 2 other senior council members and a plan to help Dresden from judgment of the Merlin and the White Council. Unfortunately, their last supporter has been killed, leaving Harry vulnerable to the ultimate fate of the White Council.
He has a little calm down from his Faerie Queen running. I guess he talks about, he's like, he's scared. He's like, not kind of in the half pleasant, like adrenaline-charged way, but in like the settle in, sit down with a lawn chair and a cooler full of drinks kind of way. It's like, I'm just gonna be there for a while. This isn't just like a jump scare moment, like, okay, I'm fine. I think, oh yeah, this is where we,
He's where he thinks
working for
about the types of fairies.
the Wicked Queen, and not that she's wicked as such, but the Seelie and the Unseelie and the Summer Court, and yeah, just very much like the seasons they were named for. Right. So, beautiful, pitiless, and entirely without remorse. Only a fool would willingly associate with them.
Whoops. And Dresden reflects on how risky his life has been up to this point. I'd been clever a couple of times, lucky a couple of times, and I've come out ahead of the game so far, but sooner or later the dice were going to come up snake eyes. It was as simple as that, and I knew it.
And this is why Jessica keeps saying he's going to bite the dust before the end of the series. Dun, 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 dun.
Oh, he's always by the skin of his teeth. Like, just how he gets through shit. It's just kind of a miracle.
It is.
And he said earlier, too, that he was like, like, fuck, I wish I'd showered, I wish I'd slept, I wish I'd eaten something. This isn't the time to be outsmarting a fairy, right?
Yeah, exactly, right?
This dude is just like...
Always, right? And at least he admits it here, too. He's like, I was clever a couple times. I was also really fucking lucky a couple of times. Like, I know I've gotten through this by the skin of my teeth sometimes. And I know that if it wasn't for, circumstance or who happened to be there, right? So,
well, he at least has the wherewithal to know that he needs to not involve himself in the fairy politics. And he needs to figure out how to avoid this to the best that he can.
And same thing is that, he's still thinking about Susan and how, right? He's like, no, man, I got to deal with this. He's like, but I still don't want to, I still want to find a way to get her out.
All he wants to do is work on the fixing Susan.
Yeah, so he's like, no, I still have to deal with, whatever Mab wants, when and if and when she appears to want, but, how am I still going to be able to work on this and manage that and do that or whatever, right? Still make that, a big priority, right?
And now, worst of all, after all this, it still hasn't made any goddamn money.
And that's the bad part. And that's me suddenly, getting ready to go. I'm like, I feel like I forgot something. Oh, yes, right.
A retainer. Fuck.
Fuck, I should have got Mab to Jess. Yeah.
Do you think she would have given it to him anyway?
I think she probably, if he had thought enough to throw it in him, because honestly, I think that's nothing to Mab.
Oh, yeah, she's got
Bigfoot,
endless
she
money.
Pulled a
gold
lump
nugget,
of coal
whatever,
out between those perfect little butt cheeks, and then, here you go. You make us. Sorry, I just realized my phrasing there was going to be, here's a big ass diamond. I guess a big ass diamond?
I'm sure she could have taken her ring off and you could have gone and climbed it and been fine.
That's it, folks. This is the end of our podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us. It's been fun.
Trying to breeze through it and forget it ever happened.
We can no longer go past this point because that was the end all be all.
Would you like to rename the episode?
Big ass diamond. Oh, gracious.
So,
yeah.
I think had he just been like, could you pay me for it? She'd have been like, go fuck yourself. But had he thrown in and been a little bit more clever and suave with it, she'd have been like, she would have taken off her pearl necklace in that moment and been like, sure, go pawn this dumbass.
Yeah. Here you go.
So Dresden drops by his apartment. He's still unable to have time for a shower and to eat properly.
Which I can appreciate, but he mentions he's kind of already late, and I'm like, you're a dude. Literally, you could have been in and out of that shower in 5 minutes, I'm sure. You didn't have 5 more minutes just to...
But you also have to care, and he doesn't.
Right, he doesn't care.
Well, he kind of does, because he does say...
Kind of doesn't.
And I don't think he wants to risk the ire of the council at this point. He knows he's already in a bad place. So
I just think,
go
there's,
dirty and on time, or...
Well,
I just say, I think there's a point where he's just like, I should share, but who the fuck cares?
Well, all I meant is he says, I think it's more just the feeling like he doesn't have time, because he does kind of make a point of being, like, showing up with, he's like, I couldn't even shower and blah, 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 and I gotta go in with all these. But again, yes, I suppose maybe it's not until after when he realizes how much more important the weight of this meeting is, but regardless.
Yeah. I thought this was funny. So he leaves his apartment and he arrives at McCormick Place Complex, a convention center. And the idea of this is just really funny to what I would have expected the White Council to have met at. I think of kind of druid, sort of woodsy alcove. This is very modern, I think, for them.
Like, you're into the convention center? All right, good.
Well, and I think even for me, I wouldn't imagine the woods, but I could see more like they'd rented out like a lecture hall at the local university or something like that.
And what kind of, like, what did they tell the convention center? That they were, like, a grumpy old man club? Like, traveling magicians? Like, what's your convention about?
Well, I was going to say, this day and age, they could have made some, like, druidic history. Because, again, if anybody actually sees them in their robes, and I'm like, there's enough comic conventions and whatever.
We're a role-playing group.
Yeah, right? They could have been, like, something like that. Or just
I think even weirder for the convention is that, like, they didn't wheel in, like, a projection screen. They don't have posters. They don't have tables. It's straight up just like a couple.
Obviously not open to the public.
I know,
it's just,
but it's just like we would like to book out a room, and that's it.
A small theater.
800,000 million of us are going to show
up.
up.
The sound system for you? Nope, that's fine.
Yeah, like that would be the weirder thing for me is like they didn't bring shit.
Although it just
but there's a lot of them.
They wouldn't even necessarily have to. I mean, that whole part of the props and extras and stuff like that, but. When you think about it, professors and stuff still wear, like, at graduations, they still have the long robes and the
they could have called it a graduation.
Stoles, right? So they could have made it some kind of academic gathering, something or other that maybe might not have been as weird for all these musty old guys.
Or maybe the people who own the McCormick Place complex in Chicago were just over it at this point.
We've seen
like,
it
these
all.
weirdos are back
I was
again.
gonna say, like, it's Chicago.
Once you've had,
I'm
your
sure they've had their weirdos. It's like mob bosses book out shit all the time.
Your furries, your mama. Yeah, exactly. This is a little bit of everything. It's Chicago. We don't ask questions anymore. You got money, you can have it.
Yeah.
So Dresden parks, and a 37 Ford in mint condition pulls up, driven by a new character. Mm-hmm. We find out this is Ebenezer, and he seems a bit like an old man hick from Missouri, in denim overalls with a shotgun in his truck. And we quickly learn that Dresden was Ebenezer's unruly teenage apprentice after his altercation with
according to McCoy.
Yes.
I like how it's implied, too, that, like, McCoy's been, like, upkeeping this thing since 37.
Yeah, so this is like my thing, right? So
a little magic goes a long way.
Right.
Well, because, Ford's only came, like, vehicles, the modern automobile only came around in the early 1900s, right? So 37,
It's got to be before World War 1 and 2 for it to not totally go to shits on wizards.
Yeah, but my point is more like, is this, like, his first car? And therefore, like, only? Did you wait a couple of years for them to get the first few bugs out, or, maybe, and then, bought, like, one in 37, and
I was about to say, I was like, Ebenezer's a lot older than 100, but cars aren't.
But cars aren't.
Yeah.
That was my point.
The first car would have been too new technology for him to have made.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, right, as we learned
That's even funnier. He's only ever had the 37 Ford.
He's a little old. He
bought it and put it in a garage. He's like, I'm just waiting for this moment that I can actually drive this without it blowing up.
Oh, fuck no, I didn't even think it was that. I think it was more just
even
like,
funnier.
Horses were good enough for my ancestors. They're good enough for me. We don't need, it's like our parents being like, I'm not going to go fucking ride around on a Segway or something, right? But it was like, he was of like the horse and buggy age, and that was like just fine until it's like you couldn't just ride your horse everywhere anymore. And
even funnier, he's got like 100 Ford 37s parked on his property.
The other possibility is that one finally gives up the ghost. Right?
Yeah. I'm not learning any other shit.
I was like, I gotta drive this car. That's all I want.
I love it.
Right? He doesn't care about. Justin's like, you can't really like ride around with a shotgun like openly displayed in your truck, and he's like, fuck it, I'm too old, I don't care. What are they gonna do? Let them stop me.
It's like every old elderly man, like, they'll pull me over and I'll pretend to have forgotten.
Yeah, whatever. Right?
Is that old thing still strapped up back there?
No.
So we find out that Ebenezer is from a place called Hog Hollow, Missouri, which is an actual location, and it is really in the middle of nowhere. You look at that up on Google Maps, and it is just a little pin in the middle of nowhere.
Is anywhere in Missouri anywhere?
I don't think I can refute that, but I don't know that much about Missouri.
I'm sure they have at least one
No one
city.
knows that much about Missouri. I think that's all there is to know about Missouri. You know when like those people on the internet, they try to name American states, and everyone's like California, New York, Texas, Florida, and then it very quickly dissolves from there. And then they're like, all right, Washington's somewhere here, Nevada's close to California, we know Ohio's near Texas, but we don't know which one.
And they can't decide if the state is New Orleans or
We all know
Louisiana.
Maine is up there by New York, but we're not sure which side of it. That's even Canadian here. I'm like, I don't know. I've been to New York and Seattle.
I saw this picture, and it, one of my friends from the States posted a picture of this map, and she's like, I can't stand the way this looks. And I looked at it, was like, what's wrong with it? I don't understand.
Yeah, right? It looks fine to me. Yeah.
Apparently it was an awful map and really inaccurate, but okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, to save my life, I wouldn't be able to pick out Missouri.
Yeah, probably not. Not unless everything else was filled in first.
And even then, I'd be like, Alaska and Hawaii, are they on this one?
So he's like, I'm surprised to see you here. I didn't think you ever bothered to come. And then this is where we find and get a nice little insight here. It's like, last time I didn't, they saddled me with this useless teenage apprentice. And it's like, now I don't hardly dare miss one. They might make him move in again. I was like, yeah. I was like, wasn't that bad, was I? He's like, you burned down my barn, Oz. He's like, I never did see that cat again. He just lit out and didn't come back after what you did with the laundry. And this is one of those moments where it's so much better. I'm glad he doesn't really fill it in. Because your imagination of whatever the fuck happened with the laundry has got to
So much better than what actually happened, right?
Teenage boys. Down a bar, I get it. I don't know what the fuck happened to that laundry and that poor cat. So that's when we find out. So that's when we get the little bit of backstory that after they decided, fine, we won't chop his head off, that he had to go somewhere. And McCoy was chosen to be the one to teach him some restraint and some discipline.
Yeah, and Dresden says that you'll learn more patience than anything, and not much magic, just to...
Yeah, they didn't really teach him a lot more. It just meant a lot of hard
a lot
work.
of control.
Which was, to be fair, what he needed at that point. He got his magic from Justin. He didn't need any more magical training. What he needed was...
How to deal with trauma.
To a certain extent, that as well, but also just how to not be
angry and reactive to anything and everything.
Clearly what he learned with Justin was a whole lot of hit first, ask questions later.
A lot of toxic behavior.
Yeah, exactly. So McCoy was good for that.
Here's how to be a human.
Just that last little bit of stability. And we know, pretty much as soon as Harry hit 18, more or less, that's when he hit the road and went off to go make his way as a professional wizard, basically. So he only spent about 2 years with Ebenezer, but clearly it was, for all intents and purposes, a good time. A nice little cap on the end of that childhood.
I think they have quite a little bit more of a background, though. But the one thing that he said in there that kind of struck me, that he's got a little bit of low self-esteem when it comes to Ebenezer. He avoids having another soul gaze with him because he doesn't want to look at the old man and see disappointment there.
Yeah, fair. I mean, I think he respects Ebenezer a great deal, right? And he owes a lot to Ebenezer, right? And he genuinely likes Ebenezer. And this isn't really, he's not really feeling like tough shit right now, It's kind of not the time that you want someone to be psychoanalyzing you and,
Well, again, this is that, parental figure kind of a thing. The father figure he never had. It's he knows he's turned up looking like crap. Because, he does say that. We were arguing whether he cared or not, and he does say when he's on the way over that he's, be sure to cut... Where I was sure to cut a devastating swath with my couth hygiene and natural grace, right? So right there, he's like, I haven't showered, I'm not dressed appropriately, I haven't cut my hair and whatever, right? So that right there, think about it. If you haven't seen someone you look up to, a teacher, a parent, a grandmother, whatever, right? And suddenly, again, you talk about showing, as soon as you look like crap, that's when you're going to open the door to the... door-to-door salesman or whatever, right? And then, all the other stuff that has actually come through, with the war and the stuff that's gone on with, so he's he knows he hasn't, everything hasn't turned out as perfectly peachy, and maybe some of those decisions weren't, right? So, even though you're a grown-up and you're well, okay, my mother can't tell me what to do anymore, but you still have a certain amount of, oh my god, right? I don't know, I'm gonna have to tell her this, or she's still gonna read my ass for doing this, because I know this is not how she would have done it, or whatever,
Well, it seems like there's a very high standard set. He knows that he's not living up to it right now.
Well, it's really hard, too, to look at, okay, maybe you don't want to disappoint your, 65-year-old mentor, But, like, your 465-year-old mentor, that's even worse. Like, shit, like...
Well, and that's exactly too, right? Harry hasn't exactly, made his way in life, right? We all sort of feel a certain amount of that, I think, in our 20s, too, where you're like, I don't have a house yet, I don't have a car yet, why shouldn't I'm an adult now, I have a job, shouldn't everything be... And then you discover that, yeah, well, you can be 40 and still not have your shit together and know what's going on. But, you just automatically assume that everybody older than you does, right? They all know how to adult. They all know how to run their lives. And, and exactly like Ebenezer's like, well, in fact, they say probably had like 400 years to get that shit straight before Harry came along, let alone just 20 years, like somebody with a normal age gap between them, right. So...
Ebenezer questions Dresden's choice of wizarding robe, which we now find out turns out to be a plaid flannel bathrobe. Yeah. Okay.
So if that's all he was going to wear anyways, he could have had that shower.
This is my point, right?
Didn't have to get dressed after. You can put your bathrobe on.
Right? Probably still has sweats on underneath, but we'll give him that much. He needs a couple extra layers just in case he knows who's going to be at this.
And this is the one thing is like, well, I guess it's his car, not him. But I was like, he's also covered in toad guts right now. But no, his car is not him.
Yes,
so that's the reason I'd have taken that shower.
Yes. Well, yeah, I guess he had a couple plop on him, but not necessarily to the same,
Not explode like they did on the car.
Exactly, except for the one he almost kind of squished, but he just right the hand off, so he's fine now. Ebenezer notices that, too. Like, what the fuck is wrong with your car?
It's been a day, man.
McCoy also notices the injured hand, and Harry just kind of brushes it off and doesn't really accident in the office, and... So, you can tell that, this is where you get Ebenezer sort of, does care about, does kind of, after the joking and the ribbing and whatever, like, really, are you doing okay? And he's like, eh. And then, figure out that, he's like, he wanted to have a chat with some other people before they go in, because this isn't just sort of a formal... weekly board meeting or something here.
This is the weird thing, because at the end of Grave Peril, Bob is like, listen, like, the White Council is coming to town. Like, we gotta figure this shit out in person. Mm-hmm. But then 9 months has passed. So it's like, did they come 9 months ago to talk shit? Or when the wizards say they're gonna do something, they're like, we live for 400 years, we're gonna get to it next week, is like 9 months from now. Like,
that's a good point. That is quite a lot of
right?
time.
Like, because, like, at the end of Grave Peril, Bob's like, the White Council is coming. And then 9 months later, they come, and it's like, the wizards just have a really fucked up timeline?
It could be, or could it even have been, again, without going
or like they went to war so fast, they meant to have a meeting next week, but then they've been at war this whole time, and they only had now to finally do it.
Or it takes 9 months to actually get that
get
many
the word
wizards
out.
into one
yeah,
place.
That many people. I was going to say, too, that he was already sort of getting involved in this research, and right, because Bob is basically like, hey, pay attention, like, shit's happening, and he's like, yeah. So, for all we know, maybe a couple of months had passed in between there, too. Maybe it wasn't necessarily the next day, maybe this was sort of an indication that...
Last chapter of Grave Peril was 8.5 months after the second last chapter of Grave Peril.
A few months or so. Yeah, exactly. Fair enough, he already mentions, the bombing attempt, and he already mentions that he's been, getting sucked down into this thing, so...
Okay. I could admit the last chapter of Grave Peril could have been drawn out.
Yeah,
I'll accept that.
Either way, any one of those works. Yeah. It's like, like the pyramid sitting guy. It's like, it takes you a while to get word to that dude, so,
So Dresden gets quite upset and angry that Ebenezer is looking out for him despite not being his apprentice anymore, and does not want to meet with the senior council to suck up.
That's his biggest thing, is he's like, I'm not going to start brown-nosing now just so somebody will give me, he's like, I already sent in my report, I told you guys what happened, that's what happened, it is what it is. If they don't want to accept that, then fuck it, I'm not prostituting myself or pandering for, whatever, right? Ebenezer's trying to convince him. And he's like, wait a minute. He's like, why are you even trying? He's like, you hate the council too. He's like, you think they're all a bunch of...
Hoity-toity.
No, swill, spouting, lollygagging, mud wallows or something.
Yeah, swill spouting pack of lollygagging skunk wallows.
Skunk wallows. Well, that's what it is, yeah. And he's like, I did not say that. And he's like, yeah, you totally did. And he's just like, shut the fuck up. I did not.
Right. And this is the first time he also mentions the Merlin. I don't think it was mentioned before at this point. Like, has it?
I don't know.
I don't think it has.
I honestly don't recall.
Either way, we get a little bit more of the structure. There's the White Council, and at the top of it is the Merlin, and then there's a Senior Council, and then there's the and then there's the Wardens, and then there's the White Council.
The title. Yeah. But yeah.
So it's really setting up what the Wizarding World looks like here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the government.
Isn't that funny? You can't say Wizarding World now without... That just means Harry Potter.
Cornelius Fudge, you motherfucker.
setting up Dresden's wizarding world.
So he's pretty amused by Dresden when he says
Oh
that.
yeah, he's all pissed off and like choking and swearing, and it's like.
So he drops this veil spell that's masking 2 other people. And we find out a little bit, because Dresden compares his magic to this spell, calling himself a brawny thug and noisy as hell when it comes to magic casting. And whereas Ebenezer just sort of does this elegant spell that he didn't even notice, and 2 people just appear.
No, I was wondering about this. I honestly, I never saw it as Ebenezer. I always assumed it was Martha. So when because Martha's the first one introduced, but listening back to it in the last little bit, I was also wondering, because then he's like, oh yeah, and I almost didn't notice the other guy. And I'm like, you know what? Again, knowing now what I know about Injun Joe and Listens to Wind, and like, because, he pops up in other books too, and some of the stuff we've seen him do, I'm like, it also could have been his. So I'll be honest. I was like, I never even considered the fact that McCoy was the one.
I always took it to be
Failing
one of the
them.
senior council's veils.
But I always, I assumed it was either. I've always assumed it was Martha's until just recently. And then I was like, I guess it could have been Listens to Wind too, because the fact that he was still just standing there quietly, almost invisible on his own, probably makes it.
I guess it doesn't really specify.
It doesn't really, because I was just going to say, who do you guys think it was? So I was like,
Yeah, and I totally made the assumption it was Ebenezer.
that Ebenezer was the one who had hit him there, which could potentially work
have been.
too, since he was the one that was.
But I mean, I take, Ebenezer is a little bit too of the same sort of heavy hitter.
That it wouldn't.
But he has way more experience.
He's got more
Way
experience
more.
and more power than Harry, but he's not
Probably
exactly
could,
subtle,
but Yeah, I don't know. Again, just the without a whisper of power to tell or whatever it always. But either way, whichever one of them it was, just points out that they're all way the fuck up above and way better than he could do. And yeah, he's like, holy shit, I had no idea.
He's super outclassed.
So it's kind of, it's totally sneaky and underhanded, and he's totally pissed about them, like, spying on him, but at the same time, it does work really well in his favor, because he obviously had no idea what he's there, and they got what they wanted, which was to see the true character and nature of, for good or bad.
Well, Harry doesn't want Ebenezer to involve himself in his shit. He's like, stay out of it. I've dug myself a hole. I want to dig myself out of it. I don't need you to throw yourself down here either.
Yeah, he's still a little in self-loathing land, so
Yeah,
that makes sense that he'd be like, don't help me, I'm gonna do this on my own.
Yeah.
Well, also, I think going back to that, like, parent-child relationship that, like, exactly, if I go out somewhere and I try to order Jessica's meal, she's gonna be like, Mom, I'm 25, I can order my own fucking meal, right? You have that instinct of, I want to protect my daughter. It wasn't me, folks.
No, but her friends will do it for her.
Her friends will do it for her. But, that same thing where you either sort of forget because you've done it for, 10, 15, 20 years, or that instinct that you just want to still protect or whatever, right? And Harry's like, no, dude, like, I'm a man. I want to solve this myself. I don't want Daddy to come in and fix it for me. Or
It's actually really funny. Because, just not even, 2 weeks ago, my brother, he's only 15, and he wanted McDonald's, but none of the rest of us did, so we pulled up to the drive-thru window just for his window and made him do it, and he's like, I've never done this, I've never talked to the person, I'm like, you tell him the same thing that you tell me you wanted. Yeah. He's like, no, you have to talk to them. I was like, no, I don't need anything from them. He was, fully thrown, but he's like, I can't talk to the machine. I'm like, you better figure it out.
Good for you.
That's hilarious, because I remember when it was Jess and Nancy. They'd be like, all right, I'm not going. It's like, Mom, they didn't give me enough barbecue sauce. Well, okay, go ask for one. I can't. You can't just go. I'm like, you just go to the counter and say, may I please have a barbecue sauce, and they'll give you one. But, okay,
I'm a child.
You
I'm
have
not
to come
allowed to exist in the world, okay?
And that's how we felt, and I love that you were like, dude, just do it, because I was like, see, yeah, you get it. That's why. It made you do it, too. It's always funnier when it's someone else.
So we find out one of the people that's veiled is a tall woman named Martha Liberty, who is rather unimpressed at Dresden's lack of respect for the White Council. She states many of Dresden's flaws, and Ebenezer does come to his defense, at least.
Still, Martha has, the straight-up, bingo card of Harry's flaws. You've hit everything I don't like about you.
Bitter, angry, obsessive, and yeah. And I was like, well, it's not like you didn't give him reason. It's like, y'all tried to, chop his head off at age 16, so...
Ebenezer really is on his side, but by challenging the Red Court when they were going to kill that young woman, no, Maddie, Haas didn't cause what happened since. They did. I read his report. He stood up to them when they damn well needed standing up to.
And that is a good point, too, and that is, something we kind of forget. It's easy to get lost in Harry and his perspective on it, right? But I'm like, it's nice to have that moment to step back and be like, he's right, too. Like, you stood up when you needed standing up to. It's
roll it back, though. This whole thing where, like, yeah, Martha's like, he's arrogant, Ebenezer, dangerous. And Harry's like, that's every wizard ever. And Martha's like, he's bitter, angry, obsessive. And Ebenezer's like, seems like he has a good reason to be. And then Martha says, you know what he was meant to be.
Yeah.
Right.
And, like, for me, like, I don't want to get too big into the spoilers here. I really get this idea from, like, neither of you have read it, but so this is just for, you know, the people listening if they've read it. But in Dune, the Bene Gesserit, when Jessica gives birth to Paul and she's aiming to do the whole Moaib, it's this whole thing where, like,
he's the chosen one.
there is this chosen one, and the Bene Gesserit come to Jessica and they say, you have to have a daughter. We want you to have a daughter because, like, in the world, like, women have, like, supernatural powers. And it's like, you need to have a daughter so that we can train another Bene Gesserit and we can get another one on the field and we're going to have more of these Bene Gesserits around. But Jessica was like, I've heard of the prophecy. I think I'm the one who can give birth to the Moaib. I'm going to have a son instead. And they, like, decide what they want to have. Whatever.
Yeah,
So she decides she's going to have a son. And also her husband really wanted a son. So she's all about, she's like, I did this as an act of love for him. He needed a son because he's the Duke. And she's like, he needed an heir. If I had a daughter, he wouldn't have that, right? Mm-hmm. But the other Bene Gesserit are like, you weren't fucking giving him an heir. You're trying to create the Moaib. And we told you to fucking have a daughter. And, like, you're not supposed to be out here creating the chosen one. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. But I get the very vibe, like, here, like, where it's just like, you know what he was meant to be. You know, like, we've got blah. And I'm just like, what is it? What's up?
Well, that's just
right?
it,
And we
right?
don't know, but
again, this other vague hint of, well,
this
what
is an annoying
was he
thing of
supposed
just, like,
to
the
be?
whole senior council
What
knows
Justin was
shit
supposed
about
to make him be, what his mother was supposed to make him be, what his, you know, birth in general, like you say, was he Harry
Whatever,
Potter
the
or
stars
was
and
he
the moons,
Longbottom,
or,
or, you know, like,
you know?
exactly, there's so many things that they don't give us reference of what was the shaping, who was meaning him to be this,
Yeah, that
you
whole
know?
Harry Potter Longbottom thing, that totally, too, could have been, like, who knows, right?
Right? Like, yeah, you're like, are you talking about some ancient, you know, wizard prophecy, or just the fact that, you know, again, given the time he was, like, yeah, there's a million things that it could be, and we're like, what was he meant to be? What?
Well, and this is the annoying thing, too, is that we, like, consistently, for the next, like, 300 books, is, like, everyone being like, oh, I can't tell you, I couldn't possibly tell you, and Harry's like, just tell me.
Right.
And as the fans, too, just tell me.
Although I have to admit, in a lot of cases, Harry gives up a lot more easily than I would.
Yeah, no, seriously, like...
They're like, we don't want to tell you can. He's just like, rude, and then...
And I get it, like, he never has the time, but still.
Yeah,
I'm just
like, I'd be like,
again?
no, dude, what?
I'd be sending an
You're
email
not
every
fucking
week.
leaving till I'm... Yeah.
So Martha is all like, Martha and Ebenezer, like, he didn't have to go to war, he did have to go to war, he said, she said, and Harry's just like, I don't fucking shut up.
Well, I do like where she's like, you know what he's meant to be, and he's like, he's also right here. Like, quit talking about me like I'm not here. And she's like, I don't appreciate you. And he's like, well, I don't like you spying on me. And but, you know, yeah, she's like, all the devastation, all the destruction, and whatever.
Well, and even more so, she's like, do you remember me, Harry? And he's like, nah, there was a fucking hood on my head when we met. Like,
Yeah. Well, and she's like, yeah, I've never seen you before either. And it was like, what the... It's like, I know, I never saw your face either. And it was like, well, then why the fuck would he know?
But she's like, why don't you respect me? It's like, the only time I've ever seen you is when I tried to execute you. Like,
yeah,
like,
he's like, you're
you
not
should have more respect for me. Fucking why?
It's like, you're not even talking about me, like, to me, like I'm here right now. And I'm like, I bet you sure as hell didn't do it when he was a 16-year-old on trial. You all fucking had your discussions and your blah, 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 blah. And I doubt Harry got to say a whole lot in his defense at the time.
So Martha goes so far to confront Dresden directly and calls him out on his pain.
She you know, ends up looking at his hand and like, oh, you're hurt. You're in great pain. He's like, oh, it's not that bad. It'll heal in a couple days, right? And it's like...
She, despite all her complaints, ends up wanting to support him anyway.
Is overly convinced anyways based on you have your mother's eyes? Like, that's the most annoying shit in the world. Every character with a dead mom has their mother's eyes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, they're right in my pocket. Here you go.
Yeah, right?
But I just like, like, I don't know, living people don't care that much about people's eyes. Like,
Apparently. Well, I guess maybe if you have your mother's eyes, you're aware of the fact. I don't think you've gone 25 years without knowing who you resemble or what features you got from which parent.
maybe so.
Whereas
but
I
it's
think
still
that's
just
part of
weird.
the thing with Harry and Harry. You know, Lily and Margaret and stuff like that. It was like, you know, Potter was only a year old. Dresden was during childbirth. So, you know, that's, I guess, the whole point is that, yeah, if you'd grown up, he'd be like, oh, I totally know I have my mom's eyes or whatever, right? But he's like, I don't know that. I never met her. And losing his dad at 6 may or may not really remember. And even if he remembers, you know, well, dad had blue eyes, so obviously I don't have, you're not going to know exactly, you know, There is a slight difference to that, I think, where, blue eyes are not blue eyes are not blue eyes, right? And I mean, you can tell whether your eyes are very definitely the ones you got from this parent or this aunt or that side of the family, in shape and color and, right? There's more to it than just the same shade or whatever, right? So...
I just wanted to double check, but yeah, Harry Dresden was born in roughly 76, and Harry Potter was born in 1980.
181 or was it 80? What's 80?
So yeah.
Oh yeah, cause nice.
They're real close to each other. Harry Potter just managed to save his universe when he was a child, so what the fuck were you doing, Dresden?
He was busy murdering abusive mentors and getting shuffled off to Hog Hollow, Missouri.
Hog Hollow, Hogwarts. Where can you find a magic boy named Harry?
Look for the hogs.
So Dresden is introduced to the second person who is under the veil, which is Listens to Wind, otherwise known as Injun Joe and his companion little brother, the raccoon.
There's some excellent exchanges that go on here, too. Listens to Wind. He's like, that's always been too much of a mouthful. I just call him Injun Joe. It's like the redneck hillbilly doesn't read. Otherwise, he'd know he can't call me that anymore, and I'm Native American Joe. Which is all of that is fantastic. And then, Harry got to go, how? And then, how? And then the raccoon scaring the shit out of him. And I love how he goes full... He's lucky he didn't get blasted. That would have been a bad. Because really, considering you've had bombs going off...
Harry's
just
quite jumpy.
Jumped in the park. Jumpy, but you're lucky that all he did was, scramble and get ready to kick the thing and didn't immediately... lance out with a shot of fire first before checking what it was, because boy, that might not have made a good impression on Listen to Wind.
I like though that Listens to Wind was also little brother is mad that you're not sharing all that food. It's it's half a candy bar.
Yeah, but when you're a baby raccoon, it's fucking gold mine. You
maybe
candy.
So, but still.
Yeah, to have that much.
No,
I know. I think that's
a
the
feast
point.
in his pocket, right? Yeah.
Well, I think that's just it exactly, right? It's to have that much food and not share. He's like, my old stale half a candy bar. You're right. What was I thinking? How rude of me.
Yeah.
Injun Joe tells him that Terra West sends their respects. So we find out that it's a very small world.
It is, yeah. Well,
Terra West is still doing good out there.
Still doing all right. So far, so good.
And might even indicate that Listens to Wind knows about the alphas, potentially.
Right.
Maybe the alphas aren't the only one. Maybe there's all kinds of alphas out there.
Yes, but they probably aren't going around calling themselves the alphas.
No,
it's such a ridiculous
they're not going around
name.
calling. I know.
Well,
no, but I just meant that there might be others that she's.
Oh, you think she's
trained
building an army?
Well, she's probably shared stories about Harry to him as well. So he's got a little bit of an
at least
insight
one
of who
story.
he is
She
already.
wouldn't have much, but at least
Well,
one story.
I was gonna say, they know at least. Yeah, well, I don't think building an army, but I just meant, who knows that.
Fair enough, because the council, did they get a report about full moon?
They would have had to probably get something, yes, because it was all pretty public in the end with Marcone and the FBI and the video that disappeared.
I know they know about Stormfront, but do they know about full moon? But maybe they know about full moon.
I cannot recall immediately off the top of my head if they specifically mentioned, but I feel like they would have to know something.
At the very least, Listens to Wind knows what's happened in full moon.
Exactly, because he knows terror and yes, that there was supposed to be, so there's 7 people on the senior council, so Ebenezer's trying to get at least 3 people on Dresden's side, so it's not a complete steamroller him kind of a thing, right? So so he's like, all right, here's the other 2. Yeah, and then we learn that
Simon Petrovic, who just so happens to be the vampire expert.
Yeah, and his whole compound in Archangel, which we don't know, that a compound has got to have, probably more than 10 people. So, and that's just within the last 2 days. So conceivably why Ebenezer hasn't heard about it yet. Presumably he's been driving up from Missouri over the last couple of days or whatever. And so they took half a dozen nobles they took out half a dozen vampire nobles of the Red Court, many of their warriors, but they managed to kill Simon. So Ebenezer's obviously shaken insofar that, these are his friends, right? He obviously knows Maddie and Listens to Wind quite well. He obviously, again, by the same sort of irreverent, where's the Russian? It's obviously this is somebody else he knows and cares about.
Yeah, he was really counting on them to be on his side for
be on his side, but also on a personal level that, he knew this guy, right? So, and then when they say that it was likely someone let them in because he's the vampire expert and knows so much and would have such good defenses or whatever. And Ebenezer's even more rattled by this, like treachery, like somebody, right? And so
There's a mole.
There's a mole. So this is where she glances at him and something passes, and Ebenezer's like, no, that's insane. And she's like, the wardens will say, and they hint at it here. Do they not say master to student? He's like, yeah, that's insane. She's like, master to student, the word's will insane. And that's all it says. So yeah, so they hint at it there, but we don't yet know who's master to student that they're talking about or whatever.
Okay.
Right, so we just get the hint of something to something, right? And Ebenezer's like, no way, no. But either way, she's like, doesn't matter, Joseph and I are only, the 2 votes, right? So we're still kind of screwed.
So we figure out that without that extra vote, that Dresden's likelihood is the Merlin will get somebody else in there, and he will be voted against by the Merlin and the council.
Somebody that the Merlin knows and likes and approves and will be like on the Merlin side kind of automatically, right? So
also, like we've said before, like Jim Butcher was kind of like trying to figure out what kind of like fantasy swears he wanted to have, right? He kind of like jumped around a little bit between like the Stars and Stones and the Hell's Bells, and he had a few different other ones. And like I think this is one here when Ebenezer is like guts and damnation.
Yeah, right.
Like I'm kind of glad that one didn't stick.
I guess like it is kind of a good. It is sort of an evocative sort of. But I mean, I guess if you're more sensitive to things like that, it would be an ickier sort of. But I was like, I don't know. I think it gets his point across pretty well. Guts and damnation. It definitely sounds like an old hick kind of Hogs Hollow sort of cuss.
I fully forgot that Ebenezer wasn't a part of the senior council when we first meet him.
Yeah.
Like, he just
a dude.
Just a dude, but like he so quickly becomes a part of it that I like have always like associated him with the senior council. I
For
forgot,
exactly
like,
one chapter, he's not.
one chapter the entire time we know him, he's not. And it's like,
but yes, that's right. Is that exactly? He's not on the council yet. Yeah, and this is basically when they explain it kind of to Harry here. Because, it's not just what it is that Harry's got to be afraid of kind of a thing. So she's like, it means, Wizard Dresden, that the Merlin and the others in the council are preparing to bring allegations against you, accusing you of precipitating the war at the Red Council and placing the responsibility for a number of deaths on your head. So it's not even just that, like, people are kind of, they're like, no, they're going to try and lay this whole thing at you and blame it on you and make that the reason, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So if you don't have anybody voting for you, and that's the thing is, like,
it'd be kind of
they can
almost
put it
like
to general vote. So this is why you need the numbers.
He is the scapegoat.
Yeah.
It'd be kind of like if, they brought Franz Ferdinand back to life and, like, charged him for every war crime that happened during World War II.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's like every single thing that happened is because of your death, that you started this whole thing. Like,
yeah, right? And, like, exactly. It's like, well, shit, so that's
not what I meant. That's not what I wanted to have happen.
Yeah. I didn't mean to. They ain't gonna cut it. So, yeah, so they're like your enemies and everybody, like, this is, those in the council that didn't like you and were more than content to kill you the first time around when you were just 16, Morgan and all those guys. Now this is their opportunity. Like, yeah, you made it into the council. You've been able to sort of stand up for yourself. And like you say, when the shit that was going on in, like, Stormfront that, we as readers were a part of, Harry could be like, excuse me. And he did kind of have a leg to stand on or whatever, right? But now it's starting to hit him. Now he's starting to realize just how in the shit he is. And the magnitude of this. It's not just like people are like discussing this war. They're like, no, we are going to blame you in its entirety. And that's, when he trades a glance with Ebenezer. And yeah, hell's bells. I'm in trouble.
This concludes our episode 9.3, Deal with the Devil. Thank you for listening. You can find us online at freeflowrambling.com and McAnally's.ca. There we have links to our other podcasts, social media, and other fun tidbits. Please subscribe if you like what you're hearing, and please consider supporting us through Patreon to keep the magic alive and to see more content. We are Free Flow Rambling. Conjure by it at your own risk.